Welcome, welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Thank you. So we are actually in the midst of social legislation, where the Torah, I think, in some ways really excels in terms of both the need and the understanding of social legislation, and also the fact that a person's dignity is also very, very important in the process. And I feel that the Torah shows great concern about this, about making sure that it's not just a matter of doling out the money or the aid. It's also treating the person as a person and treating that person respectfully and realizing that life is like a wheel. And you'll see this, today we may be prosperous and tomorrow we may be in the position of the person we're helping right now. So here we go. So what's happened is right up here, it says that there will never be anyone destitute. And right here it says, Rak im shamor tishma. There's a proviso. Only im shamor tishma. If you diligently hearken, the kol Hashem Elokecha, with the voice of the Lord your God, lishmor, to guard, la'asot, to perform, et kol mitzvah hazot, all this commandment, this entire commandment, asher anochi mitzvah hayom, which I am commanding today, you today. Let's take a look. Here we go. Rak im shamor tishma. So he says, the point is, az lo yeh b'chai b'yom. In other words, I've just told you, you won't have a destitute person, but there's a proviso to it. That is, if you in fact diligently pay attention and perform, then you won't have destitute people. Shamor tishma, right? So what is this duplication of the shamor tishma? So it says Shema Kim'ah. This is actually a very interesting point. Kim'ah means a little bit. Shema, hearken, listen, pay attention to a little bit. Mashmi'in oto harbe. He is given an opportunity to understand a great deal. And I think that the point about this, as I understand it, is that it has to do with vector, as it were. In other words, it has to do with an attitude. And that attitude, even if it's just an attitude to something small to begin with, regarding whatever that mitzvah is, if you have a positive attitude towards that mitzvah, then you have a chance that you will actually be taken along that path and develop it even further. But it can start with a minute positive attitude and then can grow to something that becomes part of your life, something that you internalize. Going on. Ki Hashem Elokecha be'erachacha. So, for the Lord your God has blessed you, or will bless you, kasher diber lach, as he has spoken to you. V'ha'avatata goyim rabim, and you will grant loans to many nations. V'ata lo ta'avot, and you will not have to borrow, right? You will not need a loan. U'mashalta v'goyim rabim, and you will rule or govern many nations. Uvachad lo yimsholu, but in you they will not rule. So again, this is a hallmark of Deuteronomy. That is the affirmation that if in fact we follow the Torah and we do in fact practice mitzvot, that we will thrive. That we will thrive. So as he spoke to you, v'hecha hechan diber. So where did he say this? Where did he speak this? And the answer is in Deuteronomy chapter 28, where it mentions Baruch atah ba'ir. This is later on in the book of Deuteronomy, in the parsha, in the section called Ki Tavo, and it says that you will be blessed. You will be blessed in the city, etc. V'ha'avatata. So this form of this word, right? Kol lashon halva'ah. Anytime the language is of borrowing or lending, right? So in a case here where it's talking about lending, Keshinofel al hamalveh. If we're talking about the action of the lender, notel belashon mafil. The grammar in Hebrew is a causative form. It's called mafil, is another way of referring to the hifil form. The hifil form of a verb is generally a causative form. So I'll give you an example. So the word lavash, lamed ben shim, that root means dress, right? Lovesh means I'm wearing. Hilbish means you can hear it. Hilbish, hifil. It's causing someone else to get dressed. In other words, dressing someone else. The halbish. So in this case, it's talking about the ha'avatata. So when it's talking about one who is creating the loan, that is, who's lending, then you use the word, the hifil form of the word. And he gives his examples. Kagon, for example, vehilvita, there's that hilvita, hifil, vehe'evatata, all in a hifil form of the verb. Ve'im haya omer va'avatata, but had the text said avatata, not ve'evatata, haya nofel al haloveh. In that case, we would be talking about the borrower, kamo velivita. So, for example, the verb velivita, which means you will borrow. So avatata means you will borrow, essentially. V'ha'avatata goyim. You will extend loans to nations. Yachol shetahei loveh mizeh umal velezeh. Well, it could, however, generally it could be referring to saying someone who borrows money from one person and lends it to another person. Right? That's what he's saying here. Talmud Lomar. And for this reason, scripture clarifies it and says, Va'ata lo tavot. Right? As for you, you will not borrow. Umashalta bagoyim rabim, and you will rule or govern many nations. Yachol ovdei chachavim acherim moshlim alecha. Well, it could be a situation similar, that is to say, that the idolaters actually govern you and then put you in charge of governing others. Talmud Lomar, and for this reason, Scripture makes it very clear, "V'chad lo yimshalu," but amongst you they will not govern. Okay, so it's talking about a certain amount of what appears to be duplication in the text. Ki yihiyeh v'cha evyon, when there's someone destitute among you, right? And so that's what it means in this case. Sometimes Rashi is going to talk about this word key. The word key has different meanings depending on the context. Sometimes it means because, right? But in this case, it's talking about a condition. Ki if there is a poor person among you, me'achad achecha, from one of your brothers, be'achad sha'arecha, in one of your gates, ba'atzecha, in your land. And when it talks about gates, it usually is talking about cities, right? Asher Hashem Elokecha noten lach, which the Lord your God is giving you. Lo ta'ametz et levavcha, do not harden your heart. V'lo tikpotz yadcha, and do not clench your hand. Okay, do not harden your heart. Do not clench your hand. Me achicha havion, from your brother, the one who is destitute. Going here, okay. Ki yevecha avion, right? And we're saying when there is a destitute person, right? Ta'av ta'ev koim. So the reason it starts off, because it's talking about different people in some cases, but it talks specifically about an Evion, and you'll see how Rashi's going to understand this sentence, right? 1 second, 12 Tevlion. So he's saying the one who is destitute has to take precedence. In other words, you don't have infinite amounts of money to help people. There's lots of needs, as we know. So how do you choose? Judith?
I'm sorry, you said harden your heart.
Yes.
Is that the same amatz when we say chazak v'amatz?
I believe it is. I believe it is. It has basically a meaning of strengthening. In other
Ah,
words, the
okay.
idea of not allowing yourself to be moved to help.
Kind of like discipline
Yeah, it's
or
very similar
mean
to what
position.
Pharaoh did, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Though
Okay.
it doesn't, it also uses shape, you know, I don't remember exactly, but it seems to me that the word kasher we know means harden as well. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Judith. I think you were going to say something.
No, that's really it. I'm sorry to interrupt and go back, but I
No,
just
not at all. Not at all. No
we're
problem.
talking grammar, so I thought,
Of
you know.
course, of course.
Okay, thanks.
So again, Rashi's analyzing the sentence and he's dealing with the issue of the fact that people have limited resources and you sometimes have to make choices, right? So how do you do that? So somebody who's really clearly in agony and destitute, you want to help first. Me'achad achicha, from one of your brothers. So he says, achicha me'avicha. We're talking here, just to clarify, that it's a brother on your paternal side, kodem la'achicha me'imecha, and that the one who's on your paternal side takes precedence over your brother on your maternal side. I'm not gonna necessarily, justify it, but obviously choices have to be made, and hopefully, this same brother who's your brother on your mother's side might be able to, be sustained from a different source. I'm not sure. And I don't know what necessarily, it's just a question of how do you choose? And how do you
How
choose?
would that affect Ishmael and Isaac? I mean, yeah, Isaac.
Yes, it would. So, in other words, the point is that if Ishmael had a brother, right? Uh, yes. So,
Whole brother, not
yeah,
a half brother.
right, right. But a whole brother, yeah, I mean, that's what you'd have to be talking about, that it is talking about a half brother, which sort of makes sense. So, but you could have, of course, a half brother on your father's side. And okay, the point is that if you have a half brother, and the chances are that they might have first of all, if the brother's need is greater, if the half brother's need is greater than the half brother on the father's side, in that case, you've just gotten the answer to that, which is you help the one who's more in need. You want to go first with that particular notion as to the need of the person. So then there's a possibility that your half brother has brothers as well, other members of the family that can help him. But I don't know that that's necessarily the rationale here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. But thank you, Judith. Thank you also for pushing the question a little bit better because it helped me clarify also how this is working. Going on, Sha'arecha, your gates. So he says, Aniyeh ircha kodmim la'aniyeh ir acheret. So the brothers, the poor people in your town precede the poor people in terms of, again, trying to figure out how to prioritize. People in your town come ahead of people in other towns. Again, you want to take into account all the categories that have been listed so far. And we know that need itself is the highest category and the most important category. Lo ta'amots, right? Or lo te'ematz. Lo, excuse me, lo ta'ametz. There's the vocalization, right? Yesh lecha, so he says, what is this referring to? Yesh lecha adam shemitzta'er im yiten im lo. There's a person who, and he's talking about here, not necessarily about someone who's cruel, but he's talking about someone who has difficulty making the decision. In other words, there's a part of him that's saying you should do it. There's a part of him that's saying don't do it. And that's where you have to strengthen your heart to come down on the side of saying you do it, not to have doubts about it. Okay. Imitate im lo yitain. L'chach ne'emar lo ta'ames. That's why it says, do not strengthen, right? Do not harden. Yesh lacha adam, in the second situation, yesh lacha adam shepotshet et yado lekofza. You have someone who extends his hand. In other words, he's in the position of actually giving charity, the kofza, and he clenches his hand. He doesn't give. In other words, He may, in fact, it's like somebody who writes a check, etc., and then basically stops payment on the check or makes a commitment, right? In fact, that's a serious one where you make a pledge and then you don't honor the pledge. This would be that situation here. And that's why it's using this verb of not to pardon, etc., in that particular context. Me'achicha ha'evyon, from your brother, the destitute one. In lo titen lo, if you choose not to help someone who is so destitute, right? Sofcha liyot achav shel evyon. In the end, you will be a brother of someone who is destitute. And I believe this doesn't mean a brother in the normal sense, but it means it in the metaphorical sense of saying the two of you are brothers in poverty. It means you will become impoverished yourself. Ultimately, that fate is going to await you as well. So, on the other hand, let's go to the next. Ki patoach tiftach et yachalo, but open in your hand, wide, right? You shall surely open your hand towards him. V'ha'aveit, interesting, he says, and you shall loan to avitenu, you shall certainly give him a loan. Dei machsorah, in other words, enough for his needs. Asher yechsar lo, which he lacks. So let's take a look. Patuach tiftach, right? You shall certainly open. Afilu kama pamim. So Rashi in the tradition is saying that the reason for the duplication here has to do with the fact that it may happen more than once. That you don't just help a person one time, their needs may well be ongoing, and you should also, if this person has really serious needs, you should help them as much as they need. It's going to say eventually, but here it's saying more than once. Hare ki, here in this particular case, the word ki, mishamesh peloshon ella, here it means rather, right? Rather, you should certainly open, not, doesn't mean because. Right? So why isn't using this term to loan? Tavitenu, you shall give him a loan. Im lo ratzava maternal. If, and I believe we're talking about here, we're talking about the poor person. He may not want an ultimate gift. Tain lo b'halva'ah, give it to him as a loan. Okay. So we know, at least I think we have the experience of people saying, can I borrow? But the truth is, they're not going to pay you back. But it's, again, I think it's being respectful of a person, right? Because it's humiliating to have to go and beg. Dei machsora, right? Enough for his lack. So it's enough of his lack, but you're not commanded to make him rich, right? You just need to, if you're going to do it, you do it in a way where he won't suffer the lack that he is suffering. Asher yechsarlo, which he, and this, so this is, seems to be a lack again, a duplication again. So it's saying this afilu sus lerochbo. So what we're saying is, even if he, let's suppose he at one point owned a horse, so you should even lend him a horse to so that he can ride on it. And in fact, if he was used to having servants to run before him, you should provide that for him as well. Obviously, it depends on your ability to do these things, but I think it also is. It's reflective of a story I've shared with you before, that I knew this family in South Africa that was very, very wealthy, and the husband died all of a sudden and didn't leave, and his money was always all in the business, and his widow, who had two boys, had to move and go into very modest apartment. And I think having to come down in that regard had to be very, very difficult. And I think that's what this is addressing, is, you want to try and see what you can do to avoid the shame and the humiliation of someone winding up in that situation. And then the word law here for him, the law, yechasar. It just could have said de machzaro asher yechasar. It could have stopped right there. In other words, provide enough for his lack which he lacks, but this which he lacks to him, which is lacking to him. This means here lo zo isha. It refers to a wife. In other words, in helping him find a wife. And similarly, it says, or likewise, it says in Genesis chapter 2, right, where it says, Ese li lo eze kenegdo. This is a vav. I shall make for him a helpmate. And there's that word law, which actually also, again, isn't necessary. God could have said, Ese kenegdo. We know he's talking about Adam in that context. What is the force of this extra law that's here? So it frees it up for the interpretation that we just had now. So let's see if I can do one more. Okay. I'm thinking perhaps, yes, let's stop here for today. And God willing, we'll be able to meet tomorrow and continue here. Okay. I'm going to stop the share right now. And in case there are any comments. Yep. Any other comments, everyone? Yes.
Just to ask more of a logistical question, like I
Yes.
tried looking at YouTube for these videos and I wasn't able to find like this Zoom video. Like where
Okay.
do you post them?
Okay. So it's a YouTube video. Hold on a second. Let me see if I have, no, I don't have my, 1 second. Let me do this. Okay. Okay. I'm going to open my Chrome and I'll give you this. I think I can give you the site. Hold on a second. Okay, let's take a look here. See something here. Let me look at something. Oops. All right. Uh, 1 sec, please. Okay, I'm looking to see. Okay, this is supposedly my channel. Okay. All right, here goes. I'm going to copy it and put it in the notes here. Okay, 1 second. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to stop the recording in a second. Hold on a second. Here's the chat. And if you go into YouTube and smack that, I think you'll find the recordings there. But let me know.
Okay,
You
yeah.
just contact me and let me know.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you bet. All right. Any comments before I stop the recording? Any other comments? Okay.